In this video we're going to look at setting up a bank account and then importing and analyzing a bank statement. From the bank menu you'll see that we have currently one account set up called current account. We're going to create another. From the accounts menu, add a custom account. Here we're going to call it the HSBC current account. We're going to define it obviously as a bank account. The principles that we're exploring in this video also apply to those accounts set up as credit cards. We're going to define the bank import format, which obviously in this case is HSBC. For those of you using Liberty Accounts invoicing, then you would also want to put your bank details, your sort code, account number and payee confirmation name to appear on your remittance advice. We've now set up the bank, and under the bank menu we can see the process import option. We're now selecting this option and the system confirms the bank import formats that are supported. In the case of HSBC, CSV or QIF. Go onto your bank website and download the file and then import that file into Liberty Accounts. As this is the first time that you're importing the file, then the data will have no rules. So we've imported 8 items and we're going to analyze these 8 items. Let's take these one by one. This is a non-profit client, so there are donations and they're going to be recorded against a donor record. So I'm going to add the transaction and say it's a donation from the third party, and I've selected. If the third party doesn't exist on the system, you can add that third party on the fly. Because this is a regular donation, I'm going to save it as a rule and give the rule a name. When you see this reference on the statement, then I want you to apply it to the donations account, the general fund, and where it's being used, department and activity. These options won't appear if you haven't selected them in your organization profile. And we click submit. Then we go to the next one where we've received some interest, and again we'll just go through the process. We don't have to define a third party for the income, so I'm just going to record it to the interest received account. And again I'm going to apply it to the general fund in full with no departmental or activity analysis. And yet again I'm going to save it as a rule. This rule I'm going to call interest. Where interest is received, then this is what I want to do. We're now going to look at 2 slightly different cases. One for office products, where what I've done is I've created a bill on the system, and this is in fact a payment of that bill, which I haven't recorded on Liberty Accounts as yet. And the second is a direct debit for which there is no bill. Where there is a bill on the system, and I click to add, the system will look initially for any bills outstanding. So as soon as I define the third party, it will look to see if there are any bills outstanding and offer them to me. I'll confirm that I do want to apply it against that transaction, and I will save it as a rule so that when I receive bills in the future, I'll do the same thing. And we've now created that. With the phone company, there is no associated bill. So when I actually say it's a direct debit for the phone company, then it's looked for the bills, there are none, and it's suggesting from previous entries that I've made that telephone and email is appropriate and the general fund. If I want to split a transaction across multiple funds and or departments and activities where being used, then I simply change the value to be allocated here, let's say to £40, and I can then click the plus to add a new line and then detail the analysis on that line. And we'll click to save a rule, and we'll call this the phone company direct debit. Again, where you see this reference, this is what I want you to do. We've now got a donation, but the example here includes a reference on the donation. So some banks you'll find will record a date and time stamp on the memo. So when you're saving as a rule, ensure that you're not saving that date and time stamp, because that will only appear in this given month and at that time. So what we're looking for in a rule is continuous characters that will repeat every month. So we're going to call this one the Pew donation, and we're stripping out the rule just to the basic descriptions that come in. And again, I'm applying. We're now looking at the National Lottery. I'm adding this lottery and saying, yes, I'm going to add this as a receipt. And I can create or define it as the National Lottery to grants non-recurring. And again, if this is a regular donation that is being received, I can set this up as a rule. And let's say this is fully in support of the Community Support Fund. So I've changed the analysis here, and I'm saving it as a rule for the National Lottery and non-recurring grant. And I click Submit to confirm. We then have the example of a customer paying a customer invoice, and when I add this one, it will say, yes, I've got a receipt, and I'm going to apply it to Venus Management. It does, as we saw earlier on the supplier example, it looks now for customer invoices. There is a customer invoice, I'm going to apply it, and if this is a client that you work with regularly, you would save it as a rule to say that it's the Venus Management rule for invoice receipts or some name of that sort. And then we click Submit. And the final example here is a paying in slip. And a paying in slip would be cash and or checks that you've paid into the bank account, which would have been recorded to the cash and undeposited receipts account. There are different ways of doing this, but one is just simply to say that this is a bank transfer from that account. So I'm going to add this as a bank transfer from the cash and undeposited receipts account. Quite obviously, you will need to record the cash and checks that you have recorded already into the account. And we click Submit. Now in doing this, what I've done is I've created some rules as I've gone along, and I can review those rules by looking at the HSBC current account and rules, and it will list the rules that I've set up. I can come back to my import, and nothing at the moment is finalized until I click the Finalize button. I can review what I've done by clicking on Show All, and it shows me the transactions that I've recorded on the system and how they've been analyzed. If I'm happy, I finalize to complete and process the entries. Your reconciled items will now be presented in your reconciliation history, and we can use the printer icon to see those items. If you've made a simple error, maybe in the allocation to a particular account, then you can use the Analyze feature. Go to the bank account and look at the transaction and the Analyze feature. Here you're not having to unreconcile an item, you're simply applying an edit to the account or the fund or whichever analysis it is. Make that edit and the system will maintain a full audit trail of any edits made. So now we're going to go back to bank and to process another import. But in the meantime, what someone else has done on the system is actually record an expenditure item as a payment to one of our members of staff. And this will come up when we do the next import. The system will confirm that 8 items were imported, 5 rules have been applied automatically, and we can use the Show All option to review them. If we look at the Show All, we can see the rules without any conflict have automatically been applied, and they're illustrated in the salmon colour on the system. If there is any error in any of those, you can simply undo to make a correction. But let's assume, as it will be the case most times, that they're in fact all correct. What you're left with is a handful of transactions that you will need to analyze. So here we've got a situation where we need to know which bill to apply against. So yes, we've got the rule in place, and there is the bill, and yes, I'm going to apply it against this bill. If you had multiple bills, then you could apply against multiples or choose which one to apply against. Here we have the payment that I was referring to K. Potter. It says it matches something already on the system. If this is the correct transaction, and I can see it is by the name, the date is in an orange color, which indicates it's not an exact date match, but it's very close. Green would be an exact date match, and red would be further away than anticipated. But this is orange, few days either way. It's the same value, obviously, that's the search it's done, and we can see it's the same person. So we're happy to reconcile against a transaction already on the system. And that just leaves one transaction to record, and we're going to add this transaction. It was a receipt from Earth Technology, and I'm going to apply it against the customer invoice that I issued. And if this again is somebody you work with regularly, you would save it as a rule, and it's going to be the Earth Technology invoice receipt. And we click submit, and then when we're happy, we finalize to complete. And that will import all 8 items. You can reference any of these reconciliations by clicking on the printer, which will detail the transactions which were included in that particular reconciliation. On your bank account itself, when you view, you can see the tick, which is a reconciliation tick, and it confirms the date of reconciliation. And as I scroll down, it tells you which reconciliation those were in. For transactions applied against a supplier bill or customer invoice, then you have the matching transaction. So in this case, we're looking at the payment. So if I click through, then the matching transaction is the bill. If I've allocated against the wrong bill, I can deallocate and reallocate. Please feel free to contact us with any queries on this and other features of Liberty Accounts.